On the afternoon of July 19th, 2011, a group of friends from Modesto and Turlock, California, reached the top of the Mist Trail in Yosemite National Park and climbed over a metal guardrail to stand near the edge of Vernal Fall. The signs were there. The barrier was visible. The warnings were explicit. Ramina Badal, 21, slipped on the wet rocks above the fall. Her boyfriend, Hormiz David, 22, reached in to catch her. The current took him instead. Ninos Yakub, 27, lunged to help them both. Within seconds, all three were in the Merced River, 25 feet from the edge of a 317-foot drop. Witnesses on the trail heard screaming. They watched the water take 3 people over the edge. Ramina Badal's body was found later that week. Ninos Yakub's body was found in December, half a mile below the base of the waterfall. Hormiz David's body was recovered in August, about 240 feet from the base of the fall, nearly a month after he went over it. Of the 12 people who have ever gone over Vernal Fall, not one has survived. This national park is loved by millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is the dark truth hidden beneath its beauty. Stay until the end to discover the shocking reality. Yosemite National Park covers 747,956 acres in the central Sierra Nevada of California. The terrain rises from 2,127 feet at the valley floor to 13,114 feet at the summit of Mount Lyell. Nearly 2.5 vertical miles of stacked climate zones, each with its own weather patterns, its own ecology, and its own specific ways of becoming fatal. The park receives approximately 3.5 to 4 million visitors per year. Yosemite Valley, a 7-mile glacially carved corridor of granite, is where most of them go. It is where the famous waterfalls are, where El Capitan rises 3,000 feet straight from the valley floor, where Half Dome presides over the eastern end of the valley in a shape so distinctive it has become one of the most recognized natural landmarks on Earth. It is also where most of the deaths happen. Yosemite has been a national park since 1890. Since then, it has recorded over 1,000 documented deaths, a number compiled from more than a century of incident data by researchers Michael Giglieri and Charles Farabee, and published in their 2007 book, Off the Wall: Death in Yosemite. Averaged across the park's history, that is roughly 8 deaths per year. In recent decades, the annual figure has been higher, 1,000 deaths. In a place people come to take photographs, to understand why Yosemite kills people at the rate it does, you have to start with the geology, because the geology here is not scenery. It is the mechanism. Yosemite's granite formed approximately 100 million years ago as magma cooled deep underground. Over millions of years, erosion stripped away the rock above it. As the pressure decreased, the exposed granite expanded outward in a process called exfoliation. Massive, curved sheets of rock slowly separating from the mass beneath them. This is still happening, right now. The walls of Yosemite Valley are perpetually shedding. The National Park Service records approximately 80 rockfall events in the park every year. Most are small, some are not, and some have no warning at all. At 6:52 p.m. on July 10th, 1996, 2 blocks of granite broke free from the cliffs above Happy Isles, a popular trailhead and picnic area on the valley floor. The combined mass was estimated at roughly 90,000 tons. The rock didn't hit the valley floor directly. It first slid down a bedrock ramp for 600 feet, then went airborne, free-falling approximately 1,800 feet. The impacts hit with the force of a 2.1 magnitude earthquake, recorded on seismographs 125 miles away. The air blast generated by the impact exceeded 240 miles per hour. Winds comparable to the inner eye wall of a Category 5 hurricane. In the immediate aftermath, the sky above Happy Isles went black for 6 minutes as a cloud of pulverized granite dust blotted out the late afternoon light. The air blast snapped or toppled approximately 1,000 trees in the impact zone. One of those falling trees killed a 20-year-old man near the Happy Isles Nature Center. Several others were seriously injured. 15 people had died from rockfall in Yosemite in the 150 years before that event. The 1996 Happy Isles rockfall prompted the park to establish an ongoing rockfall monitoring program in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey, the first of its kind in any national park. And still, in September 2017, it happened again. On September 27, 2017, Andrew Foster, 32, a climber from Wales, was walking at the base of El Capitan with his wife, Lucy, 28. They had been climbing El Capitan's East Buttress route and had descended. They were moving along the base of the cliff when a rockfall, estimated at roughly 1,340 tons, came down from the far right side of the wall. His aunt later told British newspaper The Times that Andrew had jumped to cover his wife when he saw what was happening. Lucy survived, seriously injured, and was airlifted from El Cap Meadow to a hospital. Andrew Foster died where he fell. Over the following 4 hours, 6 more rockfall events came off the same section of El Capitan. The following day, September 28th, an even larger rockfall, described by one witness as at least 3 times bigger than the previous days, came down from the same area. The 2017 events were unusual in ways that geologists at the USGS noted carefully. They occurred during warm, stable weather. Most Yosemite rockfalls cluster in winter and spring, when freeze-thaw cycles crack rock along existing fracture lines. The September 2017 events had no cold weather trigger. They appeared to be examples of what researchers call thermal fatigue, rock failure driven by the daily heating and cooling cycles of the sun on bare granite, accelerated by warming temperatures. The park typically records around 80 rockfalls per year. Research published since 2017 has documented that the frequency of Yosemite rockfall events has increased in recent decades, a trend correlated with rising temperatures. The science can identify where rockfall is more likely. It cannot tell you when. Not within hours, not within days. This is not a gap in the science that more funding will close. It is a fundamental limitation in the predictability of geological processes operating on geological timescales. Andrew Foster was an experienced climber. He was at the base of a route he had just climbed. He was doing exactly what climbers do after retreating from a wall. He had no way to know that the last moment of his life was 19 seconds away. The Merced River runs the full length of Yosemite Valley, fed by snowmelt from the high Sierra Nevada above. In early summer, May and June, and sometimes into July, snowmelt pushes the river to flows that can exceed 2,000 cubic feet per second. At those flows, the Merced is moving fast enough to carry a person downstream faster than they can swim. It is cold enough, 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, to cause cold shock. The involuntary gasp reflex that can pull water into the lungs, regardless of swimming ability, within seconds of immersion. The current along certain sections is powerful enough to pin a person against a submerged rock with forces that make self-rescue physically impossible. Between 1970 and 2007, drowning accounted for more deaths in Yosemite than any other single cause. What makes the Merced's danger so specific to this place is the deception built into its appearance. The water is extraordinarily clear. The clarity that makes it look postcard perfect is the same clarity that makes its depth and speed almost impossible to judge from the bank. A pool that looks knee-deep may be 6 feet deep. A current that looks slow may be moving at 8 feet per second. The visual information the river provides does not match the mechanical reality operating beneath the surface. The 3 deaths at Vernal Fall in July 2011 are the most documented example of this deception, but they are not the only one. The park's own website notes that more people die on the Mist Trail than almost anywhere else in Yosemite, and that most of those deaths occur not because of the waterfall itself, but because of the current above it. A person slips. The current decides what happens next. Of the 12 people who have gone over Vernal Fall in Yosemite's recorded history, 0 have survived. The cables on Half Dome have been in place since 1919. They are the reason tens of thousands of people complete the ascent every year. 2 steel cables running up the final 400 feet of bare granite at a steep angle, with wooden boards placed as footholds. Without them, the route would require technical rock climbing gear and formal training. With them, it is a strenuous but nominally accessible day hike. The cables are also the site of some of Yosemite's most clearly documented deaths. On July 27, 1985, 5 hikers were struck by lightning on the summit of Half Dome. 2 of them died. Brian Jordan was 16 years old, from Hayward, California. He was killed instantly when the strike hit the cave at the summit where the group had taken shelter. Robert Frith, 25, from Mountain View, California, was struck by lightning in the head and fell. 3 other hikers were critically or seriously injured. A helicopter landed on the summit in darkness that night, the first nighttime landing ever attempted on Half Dome, to evacuate the survivors. The storm that killed Brian Jordan and Robert Frith had been visible from the valley floor earlier that day. They were already on the summit when it arrived. This is the central problem of Half Dome and lightning. The mountain is the tallest object around for miles in any direction. Its summit is bare granite. No trees, no structure, no cover. The summit cave, which people instinctively use for shelter, is specifically dangerous because lightning can strike the rock above it and channel through the cave's interior. And the Sierra Nevada produces afternoon thunderstorms with a reliability and speed that visitors from other regions consistently underestimate. A morning with no visible clouds can become a summit in a direct lightning strike zone by early afternoon. The standard advice, be off exposed terrain by noon, exists precisely because the pattern is that consistent. Between 1919, when the cables were installed, and the most recent documented deaths, at least 25 people have died on Half Dome itself, from falls, lightning, rock climbing accidents, and other causes. 7 people have fallen to their deaths from the cables specifically. The permit system introduced in 2010 has reduced crowding on the cables without altering the fundamental meteorological and geological reality of the summit. There is a category of death in Yosemite that the park's famous features tend to obscure in public awareness. It accounts for a significant share of the park's annual fatalities, and it happens on the roads. Yosemite Valley is accessible by a single road system, Southside Drive and Northside Drive, a one-way loop through the valley floor. In peak season, this road carries traffic volumes that the valley's original infrastructure was never designed to accommodate. The views from those roads are extraordinary. El Capitan, Bridal Veil Fall, the meadows, the granite walls. Drivers are consistently looking at the landscape rather than the road. Vehicle accidents, including collisions involving cyclists and pedestrians struck by vehicles, represent a consistent portion of Yosemite's annual fatalities. But the park has a road hazard that distinguishes it from almost everywhere else: rockfall onto roadways. Sections of the valley road that pass beneath the walls are subject to the same continuous exfoliation process that shaped those walls over millions of years. Vehicles have been struck by falling rock on Yosemite Valley roads without warning. You can be a careful, attentive driver on a clear day, and a piece of granite can arrive on the road in front of you with no precursor and no chance to react. This is not a hypothetical. This is a documented reality of driving through a glacially carved canyon whose walls are, at a geological timescale, in constant motion. The Mist Trail climbs alongside Vernal Fall and Nevada Fall, two of the park's most famous waterfalls, in a route that the park's own materials describe as strenuous but achievable for most visitors in good physical condition. That description is accurate. The hazard is equally accurate. The rock surrounding both waterfalls is perpetually coated in spray from the falls themselves and from the mist that gives the trail its name. This spray sustains a permanent layer of algae on every surface. Handrails, steps, boulders, the rock shelf above the falls. This algae is invisible when wet. It does not look slick. It feels grippy until, very suddenly, it does not. In 2022, a hiker slipped on wet rocks near the top of Vernal Fall and was swept over the edge. In the recorded history of the park, Vernal Fall has claimed lives in multiple decades, under different flow conditions, in different seasons, with different victims making different decisions. The 2011 deaths of Hormuz David, Ramina Badal, and Ninos Yakub were not the first there, and they were not the last. Nevada Fall, 594 feet high and reached by continuing up the same mist trail above Vernal Fall, has its own death record. On June 19, 2015, a 26-year-old man named John Donovan stepped off the marked trail near the top of Nevada Fall and fell. His body was recovered below. 2 waterfalls. 1 trail. Documented deaths at both. The trail remains open, heavily visited, and extraordinary. All of those things are simultaneously true. What happens in Yosemite's backcountry, the vast wilderness beyond the valley and beyond Tuolumne Meadows, is largely invisible to the millions of visitors who experience the park from its paved roads and popular trails. The backcountry covers hundreds of thousands of acres of Sierra Nevada high country. It sees relatively few visitors. It has essentially no emergency infrastructure. Response times to backcountry emergencies are measured in hours. In some locations, in some conditions, reaching an injured person requires a helicopter and a window of flyable weather. The high country of Yosemite operates under meteorological conditions that are disconnected from what visitors experience in the valley, 6,000 feet below. The Tuolumne Meadows area sits at approximately 8,600 feet elevation. A visitor who checks the weather forecast for Yosemite Valley and uses that information to plan a high country trip is working with data that does not describe the conditions they will encounter. October at 8,600 feet means night temperatures below freezing. October at 8,600 feet means afternoon thunderstorms that can deliver snow. October at 8,600 feet means days short enough that a hiker who misjudges their pace can find themselves without light miles from camp. In October 2009, a 26-year-old man named Timothy Barnes went missing in the backcountry near Tuolumne Meadows while hiking solo. He was reported overdue when he did not return as expected. A search was launched. His body was found on October 22, 2009. The cause of death was hypothermia. He had gone into the Sierra High Country in the fall. He had not come back. The gap between those two facts, in the high country of Yosemite, can be measured in altitude, in temperature differential, in the speed with which the afternoon sky changes in October. Yosemite's waterfalls are among the tallest in North America. Yosemite Falls drops 2,425 feet in 3 tiers, the tallest measured waterfall in North America by total height. Ribbon Fall, in high water years, drops 1,612 feet in a single unbroken plunge. These are not tourist features adjacent to the park's real landscape. They are expressions of the park's real landscape. The same snowpack, the same rivers, the same gravity operating on rock and water that has been doing so for millennia. The falls are most powerful from April through June, when Sierra snowmelt drives flow to its annual peak. In those months, the water temperature of the Merced River above Vernal Fall ranges from 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold shock at those temperatures is physiologically immediate. The involuntary gasp response occurs within 1 to 3 seconds of immersion. Swimming failure, the point at which cold incapacitation makes purposeful movement in water impossible, occurs in 30 to 60 minutes. Loss of consciousness follows within 1 to 3 hours. There is no recorded case of anyone surviving a plunge over Vernal Fall. The physics of what happens in that 317-foot drop, the impact, the hydraulics below the falls, the temperature, the current, have produced a perfect record of lethality in the park's documented history. The park places signs at the top. It places barriers at the top. It places rangers at the top on peak days. And still, every year, the park responds to incidents in the same stretch of river. This is not a failure of warning systems. It is a demonstration of the gap between knowing a danger exists and feeling in the body that the danger applies to you specifically, right now, in this water, on this beautiful afternoon. El Capitan has been climbed thousands of times since Warren Harding completed the first ascent in November 1958, after 47 days spread across multiple trips. It is the most celebrated rock climbing destination on Earth. The 2018 documentary Free Solo documented Alex Honnold's ropeless ascent of the wall in 3 hours and 56 minutes, a performance that won an Academy Award and introduced El Capitan to an audience far beyond the climbing world. None of this has made El Capitan safe. The wall is 3,000 feet of exposed granite in a valley that generates its own weather patterns. Yosemite Valley is a box canyon, open at its western end, enclosed on 3 sides by granite walls 3,000 to 4,000 feet above the valley floor. This geometry channels, compresses, and accelerates weather that enters from the west. Wind speeds on the walls can be significantly higher than wind speeds measured at the valley floor. Temperature inversions, where cold air pools at the valley bottom while warmer air sits above, are common in winter, and can create conditions where a climber 2,000 feet up the wall is experiencing weather that looks mild from the meadows below. The wall blocks the view of approaching weather from certain positions on certain routes. A storm that is visible from the valley floor may not be visible from a bivouac ledge on the wall. A climber can be caught by conditions they could not see coming. Climbers have died on El Capitan in every decade since it was first ascended. Some were experienced. Some had climbed it before. The 2017 death of Andrew Foster occurred not on the wall, but at its base. A place people walk every day. A place that does not appear dangerous. A place where the danger arrived from 1,300 feet above, without a second's warning. There is something specific about Yosemite Valley's visual environment that deserves to be named directly, because it operates on human psychology in a way that makes this park's hazards harder to perceive than they would be elsewhere. The valley is so comprehensively beautiful that it overwhelms the brain's ordinary risk assessment function. This is not a dramatic claim. It is a measurable behavioral phenomenon. People who would never step over a guardrail on a balcony above a city street routinely step over guardrails at the top of Yosemite's waterfalls. People who would never attempt to swim in a river with visible rapids wade into the Merced above Vernal Fall. People who check the weather forecast before a drive to the airport do not check the weather forecast at 8,600 feet before hiking into the Tuolumne Backcountry. The beauty is real. The beauty is extraordinary. And the beauty is precisely what disables the cognitive process that would otherwise notice the guardrail, the current, the approaching cloud over the Sierra crest. The granite walls that make this the most photographed valley in the United States are the same walls that are continuously shedding. The river that runs through the meadow, that reflects Half Dome in the evening light, is the same river that took 3 people over a 317-foot waterfall on a July afternoon in 2011. The cables on Half Dome, the ones in every "I Did It" photograph taken on that summit, are exposed to the same lightning environment that killed Brian Jordan and Robert Frith in the summer of 1985. The park presents its danger and its beauty in the same frame. Most people see the beauty. The danger is right there. In the summer of 1999, a 25-year-old man named Yang Ki Kwan disappeared while hiking in Yosemite's Backcountry. He was reported missing on July 5th. A search was conducted. He was never found. His case is one of several unresolved disappearances in the park's backcountry. The Sierra Nevada high country of Yosemite, hundreds of thousands of acres above the tree line, crossed by granite ridges and dotted with high-altitude lakes and passes, has an absorptive capacity that is not obvious from the valley floor. The terrain that looks open and navigable from a distance becomes, at ground level, a landscape of fractured granite, snowfields, and drainage systems that can carry evidence of what happened to someone far from where the incident began. The valley is crowded. The backcountry is not. And the gap between those two realities, measured in trail density, in search coverage, in response time, is the gap in which some of Yosemite's cases remain permanently open. The permit system for Half Dome, introduced in 2010, was one of several management decisions the park has made in direct response to its incident record. Before permits, as many as 1,000 people per day were attempting the cables. The permit system reduced that number to a managed daily limit and eliminated the dangerous crowding that occurred on the cables themselves. Vehicle reservation systems for Yosemite Valley, introduced during peak season in more recent years, have similarly reduced traffic volume on the valley's narrow roads during the hours of highest visitation. These measures have made the park safer in specific, measurable ways. They have not changed what the park is. The Merced River runs the same way it always has. The granite exfoliates at the same rate it always has. The afternoon thunderstorms build over the Sierra crest with the same regularity they always have. The cold water above Vernal Fall moves at the same speed it always has, and the 317-foot drop at the edge of that current remains what it has always been. What the management systems address is human behavior. The park has had over a century to learn that human behavior in beautiful places is systematically biased toward underestimating the very hazards that make those places beautiful. The cable permits address crowding. The vehicle reservations address traffic. The warning signs address the boundary between safe and unsafe ground. None of them address the fundamental gap between a visitor who understands that a guardrail exists and a visitor who feels, in their body, why it exists. A 2000 study by USGS researchers published in the Geological Society of America Bulletin analyzed the 1996 Happy Isles rockfall in detail. Among their conclusions, that Yosemite's unique geology, steep granite cliffs shaped by glacial activity, channeling falling rock in ways that amplify its destructive force, makes the Happy Isles area subject to hazards that have importance in planning development in mountainous regions. By that time, the park had already had a snack bar, a nature center, a bridge, and a major trailhead at Happy Isles for decades. The trailhead leads to the Mist Trail, to Half Dome, to the Backcountry. It is one of the busiest areas in one of the most visited national parks on Earth. The park cannot relocate that trailhead. It cannot move the trails. It cannot change the orientation of the valley that funnels rockfall toward the areas where people gather. What it can do is monitor, warn, and occasionally close specific zones when evidence suggests elevated risk. On the afternoon of July 10th, 1996, the sky above Happy Isles went black for 6 minutes. Then the dust settled, the trails reopened, the visitors came back, and the walls kept shedding. Yosemite National Park received its first visitors in 1864, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Yosemite Grant protecting the valley. The valley has been drawing people ever since. First the curious, then the photographers, then the climbers, then the millions who come each year because this place is among the most extraordinary natural environments accessible to a human being in the United States. Over 1,000 of those visitors did not go home. Each of those deaths has a mechanism. The slippery rock above the waterfall, the afternoon storm on the exposed summit, the rockfall from a wall that had been there for 100 million years, waiting for no particular occasion, the river that looked shallow and calm and was neither, the backcountry in October at 8,600 feet, when the afternoon light starts going fast and the temperature starts dropping faster. The park does not disguise any of this. The signs are there. The barriers are there. The permit systems and reservations and safety briefings and ranger contacts are all there. What the park cannot do is override the specific effect this valley has on human perception. The way 3,000 feet of vertical granite and 2,000-foot waterfalls and the clarity of the Merced River in the morning light makes the brain downshift from calculation into something closer to wonder. Wonder is appropriate here. Wonder is the correct response to this place, but wonder is not the same as attention. And in Yosemite, the difference between those two things has been writing itself into the record for 130 years. Yosemite is not the last park where a landscape of extraordinary geological spectacle conceals a danger record that its most devoted visitors have never been told about clearly. Next time, we go to a park so geologically unique that the ground beneath your feet is the hazard, where the most popular trail in the park passes directly through terrain that has killed dozens of people in documented incidents, where the single most dangerous decision a visitor can make is one that thousands of people make every single day. That story is next.